Good morning. Welcome to the Lake George Park Commission meeting number 539, being held Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024, at the North Queensbury Firehouse. And this is not the most exciting meeting that we'll all attend this year. Welcome to those of you that are here. Do we have a quorum, Tara?
Yes.
Thank you. We have a quorum. So we'll move right along as we go. Approval of meeting minutes and fiscal actions report. Discuss the approval of the meeting minutes.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second's made. Any discussion on it?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm going to abstain.
One abstention will count. Hearing no other comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no nays and one abstention, it's carried. Approval of fiscal actions report, September 2024.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion, second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Carried, hearing no nays. Project review actions report, Mr. Stanek.
Resolution 2024-41, accept project review actions report. Whereas the Commission has received and reviewed the project review actions report prepared by staff and dated October 11, 2024, and whereas the project review committee recommends acceptance of the project review actions report, now therefore be resolved, the Commission directs that the project review actions report be incorporated in the minutes of the full Commission meeting. So moved.
Second.
Motion's made, motion's seconded.
I'm going to abstain. It just came this morning. I did not get a chance to read it in its entirety, so I feel like I should abstain.
One abstention. All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no nays, that's carried. High stroke of honesty that you have there,
Well,
Commissioner.
thank you.
Item 4.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Lake George Algae Study, proposal concepts for Lake George Park Commission. David, do you want to introduce our esteemed guest speaker?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have Dr. Jeremy Farrell today is here again with us. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Jeremy actually has class right now as we speak and has defined appropriate follow-up folks, so we appreciate his time for being here. So we've been talking with Jeremy and Sandra here at Freshwater about our ongoing relationship. They finished the Assemble project with us, and out of that came one of the key ideas that we want to take a closer look at the algae community. There's some current studies going on. We're looking at it in a little bit of a different way. So we asked Jeremy to come today and kind of talk about some concepts, some ideas that he's been kicking around a little bit, and you guys a chance to ask some questions, get some answers, and we don't have anything solidified yet, but ultimately this will help Jeremy kind of prepare the proposal that we think we'd like to have. So Jeremy, thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for the invitation, and I hope this is an exciting meeting now, Ken. Okay, so we've got a really nice acronym for our study now, Assessing Lake George Algal Ecology. And I'm from the Freshwater Institute and RPI. I'm the co-PI, Sandra's the PI. She likes to send me. Little background, I was here a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, with our Assemble project where we looked at amalgamating all this data. It's kind of obvious is that we haven't ignored the nearshore, but we haven't done a lot of work in the nearshore environment. There's been increases in chlorophyll A, that's our phytoplankton community out in the main lake. There's been decreases in the clarity of the water in the main lake. But that ignores where people are. Where people are is near the shore, and they're always, saying things like, oh, the water's getting a little bit muckier, or there's these algal blooms, or generally speaking, we've been ignoring this. And so, concurrent with all those measurements is this ever-increasing anecdotal observations, and we want to go from anecdotal to scientific observations concerning algal growth in the near shore. Possible causes for that could be, development. It could be invasive species, septic pollution, sewage pollution. nutrient cycling alterations. There's just a lot of different ways that you could wind up with an increasing algal population. And so we'd like to really tune into that. The unfortunate part is we don't have a time machine for 40 years ago to look at what was there. But what we do have is a lot of areas in the lake that aren't disturbed. And we could do a study across the length of the lake and identify places where it's more pristine versus non-pristine, and use that as our informing space for how things have changed. So the goal of the proposed study is to develop an understanding of the current benthic algal population. Benthic on the bottom algal populations, and relate these findings to all the localized issues so that we can get insight into what is causing this ever-increasing, observational information. We're going to take two basic approaches. The first approach is tried and true, and totally what we should do. It is go to 100 places across the lake, assess the algal community. We'll assess the algal community based on taking a bentho torch. That is this like black tube that you place on a rock. It has lasers in there and it shoots a specific wavelengths of light, and you can say how much total algae is on that rock, and you can also say what types of algae are on that rock, be it green algae, diatoms, or cyanobacteria. At each of those locations, these will each get their own slide, so I'm just overviewing you right now. At each location, we'll also take a scraping of the rocks, go and look exactly what are the species there, and we will also get chemical measurements collected from the water column in those adjacent areas, and observations of the land use around it, and the presence or absence of any invasive species. So bentho torch we bought a couple of years ago. We've now used it this past summer. Here's a couple of our interns out there when it was, actually the water's really yellow there because it was in a pollen environment. We were testing some different ideas last summer. We got pretty good at it, and we have a pretty good idea of how to use it and when it's best. This is calculating chlorophyll egg per unit area, so it's a small centimeter scale thing. So we'll do it on 5 rocks in the 1 to 3 meter depths, and we'll take that and we'll take the median measurement of each of those and use that as this is what the algal population is like in that location relative to green algae, diatoms, and cyanobacteria. Also, we're 99% likely to purchase a flowcam. That's terrible. A flowcam is it's an instrument that you can take a sample of algae, put it in, and it will take a picture of every single algae that goes past, and it will also do some measurements in the light field and classify each algae that's in there. And so rather than a bunch of microscopy, this is a sample that goes through the unit. Each sample takes some amount of time. And so this is going to really speed up the processing of these analyses. So we can do 100 samples without too much issue. Otherwise, it takes like 8 hours per sample. Flowcam analysis data output gives you an organisms per unit area, and so we're going to, per unit volume, and we're going to take it off area. So we're going to have to do a little bit of math to get to what is this community, but that's the plan. Additionally, we're doing chemical monitoring. We'll have a sonde at each location, take a sonde measurement at that location. And we'll also do nutrient analyses. That requires taking a physical sample and bringing it back home, and then doing in the lab sort of material, which is expensive but kind of important privately. So there you go. Those are the different data streams. And that will go into my next acronym, which will be the exact model. We want to take that environmental expression. We want to take the environmental variables that we're measuring and see what kind of algal community types are there, and then try to predict what algal community type is based on all of those chemical and physical observations. And so the result will be an understanding of the environmental drivers of community types, and kind of a backwards result from my point of view it's kind of a ranking of the different locations on the lake. Hey, this is the most disturbed, and if you wanted to affect change with some sort of policy, you could use that as your guiding principle. That's tried and true. We can do this. No problem. What is less tried and true is a bay-wide assessment. I went out with a couple of the staff here to say, hey, we also wanted, the idea was we'd like to know more spatially what's going on. 5 rocks is nice, Jeremy, but like, let's get, like, when you have an algal bloom, we want to be able to map it and say what's there. And I said, well, we can do video. We've got a drone and we can go underwater and do video, and that could possibly get it, but it's a transect. And that's really, it's not my favorite type of data. It's just kind of challenging data. So, back and forth a lot. Eventually it came to the clear resolution that I need to get into some image recognition modeling. And so I took a bunch of video data that we had and built some models, some like AI type models, to be able to predict that this would be Vallisneria here from this slide. This would be filamentous algae. And at this point I built this model and can fairly accurately classify those 11 different things that were there. Image detection is mostly macrophytes and filamentous algae at this point. I took this model and then applied it to, you guys have on YouTube some underwater video from the Soil and Water Conservation District, from one of the bays up there where you were doing the work. So this is some of the work that's there. This is identified what I call large leaf Potamogeton. It's probably Epifolius, but I don't quite know. It's put a little box around one of the stills from there, and another large leaf. It's an okay model. It's doing pretty good. And what's nice is it's doing every single frame of the entire video. And there's milfoil, and there's dead milfoil, and blah, 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 blah. And so what this is going to give us is a geo-referenced idea of what exactly is in each location using video data. This doesn't have GPS, but it's gonna eventually. Because we're gonna do this in a more real way. We have that as the goal of this. So this is like what we would do. Frankly, I'm not ready to make a proposal yet because we have to figure out how much things cost and how much boat time and how much, does this actually work? Yeah, that works kind of well so far. I want to make sure it really, really works. Yeah, my training model, it's okay. So we would do that video referencing, and then maybe we'd go and collect some of those samples and then go look at the microscope, or maybe actually with this, we'd go through the flow cam as well and say, hey, that was Spirogyra in that particular location. And this is the physical extent of it. As far as deliverables are concerned, we would do a final report, present here, try to make it exciting, and probably do a public presentation at DFWI. And our goal is usually to do some sort of scientific paper. I think that this video thing is probably fodder for a decent paper. So the budget, point assessment's pretty close with 55 grand. That bay-wide assessment, I'm still in the development point. So that's like the general ideas, and kind of the idea was to get some feedback and any ideas you wanted to like push onto this. Great.
Is that 85,000 to do all 100 sites, 100 sites?
That 100 sites would be around 55,000. And then I was like, well, we could probably develop this bay-wide assessment and fill in around 30,000. This is the best guess. The 55 is pretty close. The other stuff isn't.
When you say bay-wide assessment, I'm sorry, that would be a bay or not every bay? What are you referring to there? Because it would seem to me that you would use the point assessment to then key in on certain areas that you're saying, wait a minute, we need some more answers. But if you're doing it in the same year, you're probably not going to do it. You help. I don't know what you mean. And for 30,000 bay wide, what does that mean?
It's delightfully ambiguous. It's great, and it's because it's so not developed yet.
Yeah.
And so basically it requires a video camera affixed to a boat with a good GPS unit and driving, and then verifying what you're seeing. And so the model I built is based on some training data that isn't exactly right, but it's a great proof of concept. So there's a lot of my time like just rebuilding the model in the exact right way, but based on being on a boat.
But for one bay. Okay.
Oh, I was thinking it would probably be 3 to 5 days, but I
Okay,
really
3 to
don't.
5 days, okay.
I was
Okay,
thinking maybe I'd do Sawmill Bay because it's in my backyard, my back lake, and Basin Bay because
Okay,
they've
so-
got that big algal bloom on the southern base.
So multiple targeted bays.
targeted
3 to 5 days.
Okay.
Then, is what you're, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I understand that you're not
And what I
there
thought,
yet, but-
if, once this gets good, we could just run over the same
Sure.
space over time and have like, hey, this is what happened over time. It's
Yeah.
it's undeveloped.
Yeah. Jeremy, when you put your samples through the flow cam,
Yeah.
and I saw all the different species of algae under there on
Yeah.
on the bottom, does that tell you what prompted that algae to grow? If it were excess nutrients, maybe from septic systems, maybe an overload of phosphates or runoff or nitrates? I mean, can you when you see those algae, can you get an idea of what's causing those algae to grow?
The defensible answer is no. But the other answer from years of scientific literature is, hey, we've taken all of the diatoms and we've created these pollution indices, and so we're going to use those indices to say yes, but causing something to grow is a little bit challenging, and so using those indices plus all the other environmental variables and doing it in places where we don't have a lot of growing places, where we do, a lot of development, whatever, that's what the goal of this project is to point and say, this group of algae, this algal community type equals this level of disturbance.
And how will you determine what bays you're going to study?
You got a good idea?
Well, yeah,
It's in the air at the moment. As far as the 100 rocks are concerned, I thought I'd take a polygon of the lake and chop it up randomly and say, these are the places I'm going to go hit. And then hopefully it would be randomly assigned and I'd be able to hit those locations. As far as the bays are concerned, I kind of want to have places where we have a lot of algal growth so that I can show my models working or not.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to work.
Gotcha. And what is that photo McGeeton again?
Potamogeton?
Yeah.
It's one of the, I can't remember the,
Is that a native plant? though?
yeah.
Yeah. So when you were referring, when the
Okay.
Procelicor went in, it kept the photomegietin and it killed.
There's your, oh, shoot, sorry. How do you get out of there? I was gonna show you that.
So you said you haven't bought that flow cam yet.
No, we're,
That looks like it's a little pricey.
it is a little pricey. That's a native, that's probably Amplifolia, or maybe Prey Longus. Potamogeton Prey Longus. Big leaf pondweed, I think is the common name of it.
Yeah.
It could be-
So that's a native plant.
That's a native plant.
It's indigenous, okay. And that very last slide, with all the slimy, right there, with all the slimy algae,
Right.
that was not a bloom, even though it looks like it.
You're talking about this?
Yes, sir.
Actually, that was yesterday. My colleague Dave Winkler went out and was doing a little training for this.
Oh.
And so he went out and grabbed that little colony of algae and put it in a cup so that we could send it off to FlowCam to make sure that it's going to work.
To make sure what?
To make sure that it works on this particular type of sample. We
But
know it
that's
works.
not a
That's a ball
HAB.
of probably...
But it's not an HAB, even though it looks pretty nasty.
If you wanted to call it an AB, it would be an FAB, a filamentous algal.
Okay, good point.
But it's not,
It's
certainly
not
not documented.
It's not going to cause any sickness or anything like that.
There are filamentous algae that can produce toxins,
Oh, okay.
but they're not as commonly identified.
Gotcha.
But I don't think that that is, I'm just saying like there
Can you
is.
tell us where you got that from?
I have no idea.
Location?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Eliocharis. That was in the Silicoid zone, that Eliocharis type of growth. Could be there. But I have no idea. He was just out and said, hey, I got a nice picture for you. Great.
It is a nice one.
Okay.
So when the flow max or flow cam, when it takes the algae reading, does it also like relate this to a person, because I, for a little medical knowledge, do you test the water at that point to say what's in the water? That might answer what Kathy asked. Like, I took this algae here and I took this column of water and tested that.
Good question.
So that is a great question, and that is this part.
That part, yeah.
This part is to say, let's go grab some chemistry in that same location.
Okay, so at the same time type thing you do the...
Same time, same
Okay.
location. Also at the same time, same location, like within minutes, doing the bentho torch on the docks and collecting that samples.
Wow. It's a lot of big words.
You know, like when people collect E. coli,
Yes.
but that is it's not an animal, it's a plant.
Transient, yeah.
Okay. But there's way to test if E. coli comes from, if its growth is from septic runoff by the chloride. Isn't it from the special type of chloride ion or something?
Yeah, I think you might be referring to Holly Ann's work at
Yeah, like
SUNY
maybe
Adirondack.
it's the perchlorate, ClO3-1.
I'm not super familiar with her work, but I think she's been fairly successful.
Yes,
as
yeah.
far as the modeling I've seen.
Yeah, she
But
has
you're-
been.
That's a neuron I scratched 2 years ago and haven't looked at it since, sorry.
But when you're talking about the algae, it definitely has to have the chlorophyll in it, that kind of a plant, not a transient or a...
Well, it's not a bacteria. This is, it's a eukaryote.
Right.
I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
Well, I guess when, just kind of in adding to what Kathy had said, you know, like, there's other things that when you're testing here, but I'm just looking at all those other things. The dissolved organic matter could be a
Yeah.
stimulus to cause things to grow. The orthophosphates could be
Yeah.
something.
And I suspect that there won't be so very much growth in some of the locations, and there will be a lot of growth in other locations. And using those numbers will be reflected by those locations will
You know,
be so.
while we're on this, one thing that has always really puzzled me is out on those islands, how some people have found these massive algae growths in the middle of the lake on the islands, where you're completely away from, you know, other houses and septic systems, and I'm like, wow, where's that coming from?
It's a perfectly great question that hopefully this will help identify
Yeah.
an answer to. And that's why I didn't say, if you get this exact community, this is what you have around you, because you're getting a snapshot in time, but this is experiencing a whole lot. So this will be a really nice study to give you the direction.
Yeah.
So now you're sending your stuff out to the flow cam. You're paying for it. because we don't have-
We're not paying for it. We are testing the equipment,
Oh.
and hopefully we're buying one
Oh, cool.
in the not too distant future.
Wow, that's great.
Maybe if you rename the project the Lombardo Mason Project, checks might ensue.
Any other last things on here you want?
How long is this going to take
For what part of it, Joe?
for getting the results back to us?
Getting results back to you probably by next winter. I don't like to skip class, so I'm gonna be like, I can do it. But by,
It's another year.
it's at least a year. Yeah. Because actually we have to run all the analyses after we've run all the analysis.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question that
Shoot.
isn't pertaining to this. It's about Asian clams.
Yeah.
What's the current status? I know Dave's filled us in on some, but
The best work that's done is done by the Park Commission. And it's true. I mean, that's what's going on as far as the distribution. I think in September, I got an email from y'all saying this is the current status. So, I mean, I don't have a better answer than that.
So that's the latest, that's the latest news on Asian clam.
right. Is there any kind of device, like when you're using those conveyor belts for looking at gold, and so they have like a vacuum that sucks up, soil or
Yeah.
whatever, and you could use a vacuum on Asian clams and pick up Asian clams as well as sand, and then you go through the vacuum and drop the sand out, but the Asian clams stay on, so you could kill them all off.
2013, we tried that, and we're not particularly successful. There was a group out in Buffalo that came out, did some suction dredging. I want to say that was Middlebury?
It
No.
was Northern Middleworth Bay.
Middlebury Bay, that's what it
That
is.
was our least successful effort. It came in about 62%
Yeah.
based on the final survey, because the problem, Joe, is when you disturb the sediments,
Yeah.
the tiny ones, maybe the villagers or whatever, disperse, and then they settle somewhere else. It was very difficult work.
And it was real silty in that area, as I recall.
So, and that was a really small site, so.
Yeah, it was tight.
I still get a couple annual emails from people in Sandy Bay saying, when are you going to do all of Sandy Bay? And it's physically impossible at this level of science and technology to have any appreciable impact. There's a lot of big critters.
Didn't we have some results, and it was from Ireland, I thought, where they just simply found that by disturbing the lake bottom, that it knocked the populations back dramatically and almost more effective than everything we were doing with mats and everything else.
That was
Yeah.
anecdotally observed with the hand harvesting here.
Right. And that happens even within the swim area, Bill. Like George, if you go to $1 Million Beach and you find an active live Asian clam, it's difficult. If you go 3 feet on the left-hand side of the swim area, you can find five a dozen. So the Ireland study that you're referencing was really interesting, because we never, at least Joe and I, had never seen any reference to Asian clams that were literally feet thick in populations on the bottom. So they took a bulldozer ripper, and they just ran up, destroyed everything on the bottom of the river, but it also killed about 80% of the Asian clams. Killing 80% is the same as killing 2%, right? It doesn't matter, they will repopulate over time. So theirs was more academic. They said, can we reduce the populations? Yeah, they could. And now you have trillions of dead Asian clams populating the water with nitrogen
And what other damage
and
can it do?
everything else. Right.
All the rest of the benthic.
There was no other benthic community, or if you remember that study, there was no other benthic community there besides Asian clams. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it.
It's like a monoculture.
Yeah, it was weird.
Except it's going to be north.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Great job.
Go back to the
You know, we have to remember that he lives across the street from Dave, so Dave yells out his front door, hey, can you speak at the meeting Tuesday morning? Yeah, calling in a neighborhood favor. Hand me a beer and let's go.
That's pretty fast in 1 year. I know, but it's still, yeah. I know, that is pretty fast. And it's,
Okay.
that's pretty cool.
Yep.
It seems to be working. We'll see.
We're going to talk about pet birds now. This is not quite Canary Land, but
Handsome bird.
we're going to have John O'Connell, the wildlife biology from New York State DEC Region 5, tell us what we don't know about cormorants. Is that correct, the correct pronunciation, cormorants?
Cormorants, yep. Double-crested cormorants, actually, in New York here. So I'm John O'Connor, I'm a wildlife biologist with New York State DEC. I've been a wildlife biologist for a little over 2 decades now. I got my start in fisheries on Lake Champlain in the late 90s when the cormorant population was really starting to grow over there. And that gave me a real hatred for cormorants. So when people call, everybody I talk to on the phone these days that wants to talk about cormorants, they have a real hatred for cormorants. So I can know where they're coming from, and see their point of view. But working with cormorants for almost 2 decades now, I'm not going to tell you that I'm a cormorant lover, but I no longer actually have a burning hatred for them anymore. So. This is one of my favorite pictures of cormorants. It was shot down on the Hudson River in the Fort Edward area. But this is breeding season plumage. You can see that this is one of the crests up here. That's why they're called double crested. But look at that beautiful blue eye, that bright orange. Inside the mouth is blue also. Camouflage on the bill like that. I'm going to show you some other photos that show that these are actually kind of beautiful birds, just like other native birds. They're not just the black devil bird that people make them out to be. Hopefully by the end of the presentation you'll have a little appreciation for cormorants. Probably not much though. Like I said, they are a native migratory bird. So they're protected by the federal government. They're not a game bird. They're not waterfowl. They're not like in ducks or geese or anything like that. And so there's no hunting season for them. So they're protected the same as robins or blue jays in your backyard or peregrine falcons on Lake George. The population is recovering after a serious decline due to DDT, the pesticide DDT. It impacted a lot of birds, especially water birds. So other fish-eating birds that were also impacted by DDT, they're also recovering at the same time. Bald eagles, ospreys, great blue herons, common loons. The problem is that cormorants are exceeding their historic population levels, and people always ask why, and it's basically because there's a ton of food out there, exceptional food availability. Just like every other wildlife species that's kind of out of whack right now, white-tailed deer, Canada geese, it's because of how we've impacted our environment and provided them with the perfect environment that they want. Unlimited food, unlimited space. So cormorants eat about 1 pound a day. They eat fish, aquatic insects, amphibians, certain times of the year, like frogs or especially tadpoles in the spring. They prefer easy to catch schooling fish in shallow water. Okay, so that's the least amount of effort, right? Schooling fish in shallow water, they don't have to dive very deep. Just like us going to Dunkin' Donuts, we'd go through the drive-thru, right? Instead of getting out of the car to walk to the counter. Diet on Lake Champlain right now is alewife. Ever since alewife invaded Lake Champlain, that's been their primary food source. So really they're helping us out by eating invasive fish. Same on the St. Lawrence River, their primary diet is around goby. This was not the case a couple years ago. Before alewives invaded Lake Champlain, their diet was primarily yellow perch and other game fish. So what are they eating on Lake George? Probably a lot of yellow perch, smelt shiners, other minnows certain times of the year when those are locally abundant in shallow waters. Trout at some times of the year are in shallow waters. Most of the time trout are not available to cormorants. Bass, especially during breeding season, you know, when they sit on their nest right by your dock, real easy for a cormorant to catch that time of the year. Sunfish, frogs, really anything that it can get. Now common loons are a little bit bigger than cormorants and they eat more than 1 pound a day. So I try to tell people that are really upset about cormorants that if there was, you know, if there's 10 cormorants on your lake and they're eating 1 pound of fish, but if there's 10 loons on your lake and they're eating 2 pounds of fish, you'd be pretty happy with the loons, right? And that gets people to think about it a little bit better, but still they don't usually accept cormorants on their lake. Cormorants nest in colonies on small islands that lack predators. So a lot of other birds, we call them colonial water birds, gulls, great blue herons, they all nest in colonies like this. So if you see a big stick nest like this, a whole bunch of them in one tree, that could be a cormorant nest or it could be a great blue heron nest. They look almost similar. You'd have to actually see the bird in the nest to know what it is. They build large stick nests, prefer to nest in trees, but nesting activity may eventually kill trees over time, and when that happens, they have no problem nesting on the ground. They lay 2 to 5 eggs per nest, and they fledge 2 to 3 young per year. They do have some predators. Raccoons, fox, eagles eat chicks and eggs. Eagles can cause a colony to collapse and relocate. We've had this at least 2 different spots on Lake Champlain where an eagle has moved in, built a nest. Within a year or 2, the cormorants are gone. Why? Because the eagles will come in, they'll eat the eggs out of the nest, they'll eat the chicks, they'll eat the fledglings, they'll even chase and try to kill some of the adults. They typically try to nest on islands that don't have any predators, but sometimes that can be hard. Raccoons, foxes, they're good swimmers. They'll cross lakes on ice and get to some of these islands. We've seen snakes on the Four Brothers Islands that eat some, we assume eat some eggs. Cormorants are currently found on all of the large water bodies surrounding the Adirondacks. We only have breeding colonies on Lake Champlain, St. Lawrence River, Lake Ontario, and Oneida Lake. But cormorants are pretty common on the Hudson River, at least as far north as Glens Falls, sometimes live even further. And cormorants are all the way out on the Mohawk River. So when I get a call from like Great Sacandaga or Peck's Lake down here in Fulton County, I'm not really sure where those birds are coming from. They could be coming from the Mohawk, could be coming from the Hudson. Probably a little far for Lake Champlain birds to be showing up there. Up north, Chattagay Lake, Meacham Lake, almost equal distance between Lake Champlain and St. Lawrence River. Those birds could be from both colonies. But we are finding them now on just about every inland water throughout the Adirondacks. Usually starts with 1 or 2, and then after a couple of years, there's 10, 12. They're not nesting on any inland waters yet, but they're there. So, in the Adirondack region, they only nest on the Four Brothers Islands. These are 4 islands just off the tip of Willsboro Point on Lake Champlain. They were first recorded there in 1951 by the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. The University of Vermont actually owned these islands, even though they're located in New York back then, so Vermont Fish and Wildlife was out there. First pair nested in 1981 after DDT was banned in 1972, and the population has slowly grown from then. Peak nest was about 4,000 nests in 2009, and we started management in 2008, and we've been able to drive that population down. This is Island D of the Four Brothers Islands. These big dead snags used to be pine trees. There used to be a mature pine forest on that island. Pine trees are very, very susceptible to cormorant activity. The cormorants, even if they're not nesting in the trees, if they're just roosting in the trees, they'll strip needles off or leaves off. They break branches off. Just the sheer weight of them will cause branches to break. And then their feces is very, very acidic and will cause soil chemistry to change. We're finding on the Four Brothers, anyway, we've been out there for so long, that there's some species of trees that are totally unaffected by all this. But pine trees are very, very susceptible. So like I said, we started doing some management in 2008 on Lake Champlain, the cormorants. Special permits are required from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They are a migratory bird protected by the feds. So a lot of research had been going on the Four Brothers by the University of Vermont, and it showed that the population was just going to continue to grow, and there really wasn't any limit to the population growth. Once they outgrew their space on the Four Brothers, we were afraid they were going to start colonizing other islands on Lake Champlain, and we were afraid that they were going to be having a lot of impacts to the other birds that nest on the Four Brothers. So that was the reason why we started management. And what we do is we apply corn oil, 100% corn oil, to all the eggs and all the nests that we can reach, and this prevents those eggs from hatching. So the corn oil coats the egg, it clogs up all the pores, and it prevents oxygen transfer through the eggshell or through the membrane. So it prevents the egg from developing any further. The birds will just continue to sit on those eggs and incubate them well until the middle of summer, when they just kind of rot and pop. If you were to destroy the eggs, the birds would just lay more eggs, right? So we want those eggs to sit there all summer long. We could also destroy the nests. Our permit allows us to do that, but same thing, if you tear the nest down, they start rebuilding it immediately. You have to go back every couple of days and keep tearing the nest down. So even though applying corn oil is kind of messy, it's not a real easy thing to do, but it works really effectively. So we oil all the nests that we can reach from the ground. When we started in 2008, most of the trees were dead and the shrubs were still pretty short, so we could oil almost all the nests at that time. Now, the shrubs are over my head and some have even reached the tree level, so there's a lot of nests that are out of reach that we can't apply oil to anymore. We carry a backpack sprayer with a telescopic wand. We can reach probably 12 to 15 feet in the air, but some nests still get away from us. We had been doing shooting of cormorants on Lake Champlain also in 2008 up until a certain point, and in some parts of New York we still shoot cormorants. So we've been able to keep the population stable at about 2,000 nests ever since 2012, after starting control in 2008. So you can see with oiling the eggs and shooting, we were able to drive the population way down. And now just with oiling alone, we've been able to keep that population pretty stable. Oiling the eggs has limited productivity to one or less than one young per nest. So if you remember a couple slides back, I said they lay 3 to 5 eggs, fledge 2 to 3 young. We've been able to keep that at less than one young per nest per year. And that's the only way we keep the population stable. If we could drive it down even further, closer to 0, we could keep the population declining. But like I said, some of the trees are getting too high now, and we just can't get there anymore. So prior to 2017, we had some pretty broad management authority. Fish and Wildlife Service had a public resources depredation order in effect that we were working under. It allowed us to oil eggs and shoot cormorants pretty much on Lake Champlain and within the Lake Champlain watershed. 2016, the Fish and Wildlife Service was sued over its cormorant management, and management was halted about midsummer 2016. Wasn't until 2018 that we got a new permit, and this new permit is very, very limited in what it allows. So it's we've been only able to manage cormorants where they're having a direct impact on other wildlife species or their habitats. And those are only species of conservation concern, so endangered species, threatened species, stuff like that. So it's really limited us to what we can do and where we can do it. We also recently got a new permit that allows us to do some cormorant management when they're having impacts to fish. But that's also limited to where we can prove there's an impact to fish, and then those locations are listed on the permit. So we can't, if they start having an impact somewhere, we can't just run out and start doing management. We've got to prove that there's impact, apply to the Fish and Wildlife Service for that authority. And there's been no documented impacts to fish on Lake Champlain or Lake George or any of our Adirondack waters so far. So these are the species, some of the other species that nest on the Four Brothers Islands that give us the authority to manage there. Black-crowned night heron, another fish-eating bird. They nest in the trees, but they nest more in the center of the tree, closer to the trunk, in the lower branches. So the cormorants are all nested kind of above them. But since they're competing for space and killing the trees that the night herons rely on, it gives us some authority to do some action. Gray egrets, also nesting on the Four Brothers. They prefer to nest in the very tops of the trees. Luckily, they're a little bit more aggressive than the cormorants, and they can kind of get the space that they want and push the cormorants out. But again, they depend on the trees, so if the cormorants are impacting the trees, gray egrets would be forced to nest someplace else. Caspian terns are ground nesters. One of the islands, Island C, is a treeless island. It's all covered in grass, and is covered in about 10 to 12,000 ring-billed gull nests and about 400 Caspian tern nests. But the double-crested cormorants will also nest on the ground, so we try to keep them off of that island completely to give the gulls and the terns enough space. So Lake George. We have been shooting cormorants on Lake George back when we had the other permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service. You can see there that we killed 25 in 2010 and, close to 30 for a couple other years. But like I said, we no longer have the authority to do that, unfortunately. So there is a gentleman that lives on the lake that's been sending me some pictures this year of big groups of cormorants and some of the damage that's being done. And clearly you can see this is a white pine, this is a white pine. Like I said, white pines are very, very susceptible. White cedar, on the other hand, here and here, white cedar, the branches are really flimsy. They don't support the weight of a cormorant, so cormorants really don't sit in them. They don't do any damage to them. And sometimes the feces will have an impact on white pine or white cedar, and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know if it depends on what the other soil chemistry is or soil type or what, but so hopefully it doesn't have much impact on those white cedars. But other species like green ash and basswood seem to be completely unaffected by cormorants at all. So what we're seeing on the Four Brothers is even though all those white pine trees died 20 years ago, it's been taking a long time, but now they're all being replaced by green ash and basswood trees. Unfortunately, the green ash is probably going to die in the next couple of years too, but the basswood trees continue to grow, and it'll just turn the island into a different type of ecosystem. So 54 cormorants sitting on the New Island jetty. What kind of impact is that happening? It's not having any impact, right? They're not killing the rocks. They're eating fish, and they don't look very good. People don't like the looks of them. But how many are too many? This is one of those pictures here that I wanted to point out just how beautiful the birds can be when you get up close to them. Not very many people are going to get up as close to a cormorant as I do, but look at that color pattern on their feathers there. They were heavily hunted once upon a time for the feather industry, for the hat industry, and which is one of the reasons why their population had declined so low prior to DDT. But studies are mixed. There's way too many variables to figure out how many cormorants are too many for a water body. The size of the lake, the depth of the lake, the species composition of the fish, water clarity. Really it comes down to human tolerance as to how many are too many. If fish are overpopulated in a water body, then increased predation is a good thing. When we started doing work on Lake Champlain, the fisheries biologists there said that the yellow perch population was overpopulated, causing stunted yellow perch. And cormorants eating 20,000 fish a day was a good thing because it was taking some of that biomass out of the lake and allowing the yellow perch to grow bigger. That's not what the fishermen want to hear, and you can't convince them of that. So what can I do? When I go and talk to other lake associations, I tell them to look for this. If you just have cormorants nesting in or roosting in a tree and fishing on your lake, you're not going to like it, but it's okay. That's what they do. If you see nesting cormorants, get a picture and call me right away. We won't be able to come out and do anything about it right away because we don't have your individual water listed on our permit, but we got to document it and get the process started to be able to do something. What else can you do? Document numbers. You can get a permit if cormorants are doing damage to your privately owned island. You can get a permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service to do something about that. Maybe haze and harass. The federal government has said that there's no permit required to simply haze and harass cormorants, but you still need a permit from DEC to harass wildlife. So this is one thing that I see all the time when I am down here on Lake George, which isn't very often. Anytime there's a big flock of cormorants out in the lake, a boat or a jet ski comes at them full throttle to get them up and move them around, right? That's pretty common practice down here, or it seems to be. Technically, that's not legal. You got to have a permit from DEC to harass wildlife. But it's something that we might be able to do in the future. So Dave and Joe and I had a meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, and we talked about some of this stuff. And what I hope we're going to do is start documenting some of the damage on the lake and start collecting numbers. So next year, Marine Patrol guys, when you're out doing your work, give you a very simple data sheet, collect some numbers in some locations of where the cormorants are, and just so we can start building a base of knowledge of what's going on down here. Figure out what the population is, how much damage is being done, and then maybe we could work toward a solution in the future. If it's hazing and harassing, Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't like to jump right to lethal control. They usually want us to try some other methods in between. The problem with hazing and harassing, in my mind anyway, is we might not like the results. If we could harass the cormorants off Lake George and get them back on Lake Champlain, that'd be ideal, right? But what if they decide to go someplace else like Glen Lake or Lake Luzerne, or that's not the solution we really want, right? But the reality is, from the work that we did in the early 2000s, we're just going to chase them from one end of the lake to the other. It's a big lake. We really have to put like a full court press on them, I think. So those are some options. And I guess we can continue to talk about other options, especially after we get some baseline data next year.
Do they migrate
They do migrate.
to, I assume, a known place?
They should be leaving pretty soon if they haven't left already, and they mostly go down to the south, Alabama, Louisiana, where there's a lot of fish farms, and then they do a lot of damage down there, and a lot of them get shot down there. We had been banding cormorants on Lake Champlain for a good 10 years or so, and that's where most of our band returns came from, was from fish farms in southern states. And also they go to Florida quite a bit, but there's not as many fish farms in Florida, I guess.
John, do you know why there's not any nests on Lake George, even though they've been here since, what, 2007, 8?
No, that's a great question. We've been asking ourselves that for a while now. They've been hanging out on the Waltonia Islands for a very long time, doing some damage up there. I don't know if maybe there's some predators down here. Some of those islands are pretty close to shore. Raccoons could get out there. Maybe it's just human disturbance, especially, they're definitely not going to nest on the campground islands because there's too many people there, but even some of the picnic islands, maybe there's just enough people on the weekends or whatever to keep the cormorants away. We've also wondered if maybe there's a certain size island that they want. The Four Brothers Islands are fairly large, and most of the islands down here are maybe a little too small. I don't know, but we'll just keep an eye out for that for sure.
There's that little rock type of island just south of the Mother Bunch, and they have a good time there. Them a lot, yeah. But I rode the island line trail on Lake Champlain from Burlington way out.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, and oh my heavens, we were on one of the big bridges that crossed over. I think the Winooski River flows into the lake there.
Yep.
I could not believe there must have been 500 of them. They were all over the place, and they were having a good time. But you don't worry about the feces and all that goes into Lake George from them. That's just part of Mother Nature, huh?
Yeah. As far as I know, there's probably only about 50 cormorants on the lake.
That's not much.
For whenever I get a lot of calls from Lake George from folks, and they tell me they saw 50 cormorants or whatever. And they'll tell me where, and I'll say, well, did you were you at other places on the lake that day that you saw them? Yes. Did you see them anyplace else? No.
Yeah.
So that's telling me that they're just one big flock. But that's one of the questions that we hope to answer next year with the Marine Patrol taking some notes for us.
John, this was a real eye-opener. I really thought it was going to be so much, but you were going to paint a really bad picture of them on the lake. It was good to hear this. Thank you.
Well, they're beautiful, right? Look at this blue.
Well,
No one's going to see that blue.
Yeah.
But there's a question over here first.
Yeah. Okay. What was the basis of the 2016 lawsuit?
So it was basically just a bunch of Fish and Wildlife Service employees or former employees pointing out the fact that the Fish and Wildlife Service didn't follow their own rules. The permit needed to go through another environmental impact statement process, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, due to funding constraints and staff's constraints, just reauthorized it without the public comment period.
So it's not environmental concerns.
Nope, it was just a bunch of folks pointing out that the feds weren't even following their own rules that they make everyone else live by, so. But there was some concerns about it just being the authority being too broad, so that's why the new permit is based on some different science.
I'm
I
sorry.
assume that we're finding them on Lake George now, and they're just roosting, they're not nesting. Does this mean those exact same cormorants are flying over to Lake Champlain or down to Hudson River or somewhere and nesting there, and just coming over, like doing a day trip?
It could be. So cormorants don't nest until they're at least 2 years old, sometimes even 3 years old. So those young of the year birds, those 1 year, 2 year, those non-breeding birds, they just have a summer of leisure, right? They don't have young to take care of. So they're probably the ones that are striking out and exploring new areas. They're the ones that are over here on Lake George or some summer vacation out in the Adirondack somewheres.
Okay. That makes sense.
But also there's 1 year old, 2 year old birds on the Hudson River that are maybe coming, pushing a little bit further north and exploring the area. So that's my guess. But again, we don't know if those 50 birds that are on Lake George are staying here every single day, or some of them go back to Lake Champlain and come back. If there's how much mixing there is, that'd be a really interesting study to put some transmitters on some and figure that out. But
We could authorize you to do that.
we haven't gotten there yet.
I have just one more question, and you're the person, because you're a DEC wildlife biologist. I just found out this past week, and I've asked this question more than once in the past 20 years. You gave a list of the fish that this bird eats.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just found out that the DEC says that one of the 36 species of fish in Lake George is the common American eel. I had no idea there were eels in Lake George, and I'm wondering why in heck this bird isn't eating them.
It probably is. That wasn't a comprehensive list. Cormorants will eat anything.
So there really are eels in Lake George?
Sure.
How come we've never
Probably.
seen, have you ever seen one?
I have not, but my grandfather, who would bullhead, he would catch bullhead all the time. He would catch eel now and then in Lake George. Yes. He'd tell me about it. But
Do they swim in deep water or shallow, or
You're
where
safe,
are
Ken.
they?
yeah, I think you're safe too.
Hardly bite.
Pardon me?
Rattlesnake is the predator. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was one more question, but he got it. Okay.
Information that we didn't have, but we do need. Now we can all spread the message to those of us who. Okay, we are going to continue on with item number 6. It involves the choice of our lawyers, law firm for the next 5 years, and we all know how important that is. And so I asked our attorney, our incumbent, if she wanted to leave the room while we were getting the Oscar written up, and she said she was gonna toughen it out and stay right here. And she's sitting next to me, so I'm a little scared. We have a resolution of which I don't think I have. Joe has it.
Resolution 2024-42, whereas the commission retains legal counsel under a contractual arrangement based on a pre-described evaluation of competitive proposals following a formal procurement process. And whereas the term of the current contract expires on October 31st, 2024, and whereas the commission prepared a request for proposals which was distributed to a number of area law firms and noticed in the New York State Contract Reporter. And whereas 4 proposals were received in response to the request for qualifications and were reviewed by a commission ad hoc committee in accordance with the methodology set forth in the RFP and approved by the New York State Controller's Office. And whereas the firm of Bartlett, Pontiff, Stewart, and Rhodes of Glens Falls received the highest rating by the ad hoc committee, and that the committee recommends entering into a contract with this firm as legal services provider to the commission. Now therefore be resolved that the commission accepts the proposal of the Bartlett, Pontiff, Stewart, and Rhodes to provide legal services to the commission for the period of January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2029. So moved.
Second.
Motion's made, motion second. Any discussion? Bill?
I just wanted to say, I read the whole report from the committee, and I was very impressed with how thorough it was and how easy this decision should be for every commissioner. It makes sense. I was kind of pleased because I've always enjoyed working with this firm and with the representative they send us, maybe particularly. But it's just, it's a good relationship, and I was real pleased to see how thorough it was, so that I'm so comfortable to vote in favor of this.
I have a question. The current contract expires this month, October 31st, but the new contract doesn't start until January 1st.
You're on your own.
We have
Freedom,
a month contract
freedom.
extensions that were-
What do you want to pass the next 60 days?
We might want to rethink.
Sorry.
No, we have there's a 2-month amendment.
Okay. Good enough. So moved.
Motion's been made, motion's been carried, motion's been discussed. All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no nays, congratulations. Let me officially
Thank
congratulate
you. Thank you.
And I have to disclose that first time I met Dick Bartlett, I was 20 years old, which was yesterday, by a long shot. And
I was about 20 when I met him, too.
you weren't even born when I met him. When you get old, you're old. Well, that's great. We are well represented again for a while.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you decided to stick with us. I mean, we have been with you folks forever. So I really do appreciate it.
It was
Us despite the new commissioners, too.
it was a tough
all right.
decision, I'll tell you. The guy from Buffalo had me swayed. The applicant, I should say. Law Enforcement Committee report.
Okay, the Law Enforcement Committee met at 9:15, and Lieutenant Joe Johns gave us a report, first of all, on the equipment that he and Sergeants Pacione and Mitchell went to Hampton Bays, Long Island, and they test drove a 25-foot life-proof patrol boat owned by the DEC, which has an aluminum hull, not a fiberglass, very close to a Boston whaler. It was pretty nice, and because we're looking for a new boat. And we ordered 2 new Yamaha motors for Boat 108, 200 horsepower each. And we're also requesting 2 more Yamaha motors from Parks for Boat 106, which that has 3,100 hours on it. There are 3 boats left in the water. One is going to be out and winterized this week. We'll pull another one next week. And the last day for the Marine Patrol is October 31st. And 1 boat will stay in the water for emergencies until mid-December. And we're going to keep 5 members of the Marine Patrol on the books until the final boat is pulled from the lake. And we talked about the boat inspection stations. October 31st is the end of the regular season. After the 1st of November, there will be volunteers, so the Park Commission will staff the inspection stations voluntarily, whatever, until the end of November, weather cooperating, usually 1 person a day. And we talked, Dave Wick expounded pretty nice on how our money is going to be spent, and that was pretty enlightening and exciting. And we are all looking forward to tuning into the webinar 7 o'clock tomorrow evening that the LGA will be holding. Are there any additions or deletions that you'd like me to do? Okay, then I'll read the resolution 2024-43, whereas the Law Enforcement Committee met on October 22, 2024, to review matters pertaining to the Lake George Park Commission's Marine Patrol and the Commission's law enforcement program. And whereas active law enforcement cases and their status were reviewed in executive session, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee has reported on the results of that committee meeting at this full commission meeting, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee recommends acceptance of this month's law enforcement report. Now therefore be it resolved that the commission accepts the report of the Law Enforcement Committee. I make a motion to do that.
Second.
Motion is made, motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That is carried with no nays. Item number 8, public comments. Mr. Novitsky, welcome. Are you hoping to make some public comments?
No, thanks.
Can I ask you some public questions?
This always works well.
Well, you walk through the door, not me. What's the new information that the LGA is going to be sharing on the phone call tomorrow night?
You know, we just want to keep everybody's attention and focused on it, so you'll have to tune in. It's just,
Well, I'm going back to a conversation I had with John Kelly, a number of conversations that I've had with John Kelly, because we talk a lot since last August. And I was under the impression that new information was going to be shared with no surprise. And maybe your information is not surprising. I mean, that would be an appropriate answer if that is the answer.
that's for my chair to talk to you, so. My understanding was that nothing would be presented that was not openly discussed with you.
Nothing startling, nothing that we don't already know.
No, I think that's my understanding.
Well, that's-
In fact, we were not going to put information on there that was not discussed with you.
Okay.
So some reports that we received from our consultants, I was told not to put on there. So everything that was going to be there has to have been discussed with you, and my understanding it's the two of you that are in communication.
One of the reasons that I ask is that I've had calls this week from some of the commissioners, some of my friends, that this would have really been a good project to have co-opted between the LGA and the LGPC. So I just share that with you.
It would have been great, because these bills are big. Would have loved that. These bills are big, so I would have loved that.
The bills are big.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the sampling for the active ingredient, the degradants,
No, I was talking specifically about the...
the webinar?
The Zoom call, the presentation. I wouldn't talk about paying for anything.
I would have placed my money on that.
We're broke. We're all our money's eaten up with the compensation for the commissioners. No, but I appreciate that information.
No,
Glad you were here.
that's discussions that you and John have, so
Is there a process to get involved with this phone call?
I think you have to register, then you get sent the link for that like 15 minutes ahead of time or something like that. And it starts at 7, be about 5 minutes of housekeeping, and then 20 minutes of John and myself, and then questions and answers. I believe the majority of it you've seen already.
Okay.
And it's already up on the website, so.
Good. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Al.
That was easy.
Yeah, see?
Good to see you.
Good to be seen. Thank you. Anyone else here have any comments for us? Any commentary from, I guess we're at 11:16. Anybody got anything else to throw in the barrel? I told you it wasn't going to be the most exciting meeting of the year.
Second?
Move to adjourn?
I heard that, and I said second.
Is there any discussion on that? All in favor? We're done. We'll see you in 30 days.